On this video, I'm going to carry on reading from Waldo Emerson's book, The Over Soul, which is part of his spiritual writings. I'm going to carry on from where we left off yesterday, on page 262. Please leave your feedback, your thoughts, your comments. I look forward to hearing from you. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And please press the like or dislike button and let me know what you think. Also, if you don't mind, just tell me, do these ideas resonate with you? Have you learned something from these amazing teachings? Please let me know. I very much appreciate it. Page 262. As with events, so it is with thoughts. When I watch that flowing river, which out of regions I see not pours for a season, it streams into me. I see that I am a pensioner, not a cause, but a surprised spectator of this ethereal water, that I desire and look up and put myself in the attitude of reception. But from some alien energy the visions come, the supreme critic of the errors of the past and the present, and the only prophet of that which must be is the great nature in which we rest as the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere. The unity, that oversoul, within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all other. The common heart, of which all sincere conversation is the worship, to which all right action is submission. That overpowering reality, which confutes our tricks and talents, and constrains every one to pass for what he is, and to speak from his character and not from his tongue, and which evermore tends to pass into our thought and hand and become wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. And this deep power in which we exist, and whose beatitude is all accessible to us, is not only sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the things seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. We see the world piece by piece as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole, which these are the shining parts, is a soul. Only by the wisdom of that wisdom can the horoscope of the ages be read. And by falling back on our thoughts, by yielding to the spirit of prophecy, which is innate in every man, we can know what it saith. Every man's words who speaks from that life must sound vain to those who do not dwell in the same thought on their own part. I dare not speak for it. My words do not carry its august sense. They fall short and cold. Only itself can inspire whom it will, and behold, their speech shall be lyrical and sweet and universal as the rising of the wind. Yet I desire, even by profane words, if I may not use sacred, to indicate the heaven of this deity, and to report what hints I have collected of the transcendent simplicity and energy of the highest law. If we consider what happens in conversation, in reveries, in remorse, in times of passion, in surprises, in the instructions of dreams, when often we see ourselves in masquerade, the droll disguise is only magnifying and enhancing a real element and forcing it on our distant notice. We shall catch many hints that will broaden and lighten into knowledge of the secret of nature. All goes to show that the soul in man is not an organ, but animates and exercises all the organs, is not a function like the power of memory, of calculation, of comparison, but uses these as hands and feet, is not a faculty, but a light, is not the intellect or the will, but the master of the intellect and the will, is the background of our being, in which they lie, an immensity not possessed and that cannot be possessed. From within or from behind, a light shines through us upon things and makes us aware that we are nothing, but the light is all. A man is the facade of a temple wherein all wisdom and all good abide. What we commonly call man, the eating, drinking, planting, counting man, does not, as we know him, represent himself, but misrepresents himself. Him we do not respect, but the soul, whose organ he is, would he let it appear through his action, would make our knees bend. When it breathes through his intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through his will, it is virtue. When it flows through his affection, it is love. And the blindness of the intellect begins when it would be something of itself. The weakness of the will begins when the individual would be something of himself. All reform aims in some one particular to let the soul have its way through us. In other words, to engage us to obey. Of this pure nature, every man is at some time sensible. Language cannot paint it with his colors. It is too subtle. It is undefinable, unmeasurable. But we know that it pervades and contains us. We know that all spiritual being is in man. A wise old proverb said, God comes to see us without bell. That is, as there is no screen or ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens, so is there no bar or wall in the soul. In the soul, where man, the effect, ceases, and God, the cause, begins. The walls are taken away. We lie open on one side to the deeps of spiritual nature, to the attributes of God. Justice, we see and know. Love, freedom, power. These natures no man ever got above, but they tower over us, and most in the moment, now when our interests tempt us to wound them. The sovereignty of this nature whereof we speak is made known by its independency of those limitations which circumscribe us on every hand. The soul circumscribes all things. As I have said, it contradicts all experience. In like manner, it abolishes time and space. The influence of the sense has, in most men, overpowered the mind, to that degree that the walls of time and space have come to look real and insurmountable. And to speak with levity of these limits is, in the world, the sign of insanity. And to speak with levity of these limits is, in the world, the sign of insanity. Yet time and space are but inverse measures of the force of the soul. The spirit sports with time. Quote, can crowd eternity into an hour, or stretch an hour to eternity? I'm going to reread that. Quote, can crowd eternity into an hour, or stretch an hour to eternity? End quote. We are often made to feel that there is another youth and age than that which is measured from the year of our natural birth. Some thoughts always find us young and keep us so. Such a thought is the love of the universal and eternal beauty. Every man parts from that contemplation with the feeling that it rather belongs to ages than to mortal life. The least activity of the intellectual powers redeems us in a degree from the conditions of time. In sickness and languor, give us a strain of poetry or a profound sentence, and we are refreshed. Or produce a volume of Plato or Shakespeare, or remind us of their names, and instantly we come into a feeling of longevity. See how the deep divine thought reduces centuries and millenniums and makes itself present through all ages. Is the teaching of Christ less effective now than it was when first his mouth was opened? The emphasis of facts and persons in my thought has nothing to do with time. And so always the soul's scale is one, the scale of the senses, and understanding is another. Before the revelations of the soul, time, space, and nature shrink away. In common speech, we refer all things to time, as we habitually refer the immensely sounded stars to one concave sphere. And we see that the judgment is distant or near, that the millennium approaches, that a day of certain political, moral, social reforms is at hand, and the like. When we mean that in the nature of things, one of the facts we contemplate is external and fugitive, and the others permanent, incarnate with the soul, the things we now esteem fixed shall, one by one, detach themselves like ripe fruit from our experience and fall. The wind shall blow, them none knows whither. The landscape, the figures, Boston, London, of facts as fugitive as any distinction past, or any whiff or mist of smoke. And so is society, and so is the world. The soul looketh steadily forward, creating a world before her, leaving worlds behind her. She has no dates, no rights, no persons, or specialties, no man. The soul knows only the soul. The web of events is the flowing robe in which she is clothed. After its own law, and not by arithmetic, is the law of its progress to be computed. The soul advances are not made by gradation, such as can be represented by motion in a straight line, but rather by ascension of state, such as can be represented by metamorphosis, from the egg to the worm, from the worm to the fly. The growths of genius are of certain total character. That does not advance the elect individual first over John, then Adam, then Richard, and give to each the pain of discovered inferiority. But by every throe of growth, the man expands there where he works, passing at each pulsation classes, populations of men. With each divine impulse, the mind rends the thin rinds of the visible and finite, and comes out into eternity, and inspires and expires in its ear. It converses with truths that have always been spoken in the world, and becomes conscious of a closer sympathy with Zeno and Arian than with persons in the house. This is the law of moral and mental game. The simple rise as by specific levity, not into a particular virtue, but into the region of all the virtues. They are in the spirit which contains them all. The soul requires purity, but purity is not it. Requires justice, but justice is not that. Requires beneficence, but is somewhat better. So that there is a kind of descent and accommodation felt when we leave speaking of moral nature to urge a virtue which it rejoins. To the well-born child, all the virtues are natural and not painfully acquired. Speak to his heart, and the man becomes suddenly virtuous. Within the same sentiment is the germ of intellectual growth, which obeys the same law. Those who are capable of humility, of justice, of love, of aspiration, stand already on a platform that commands the sciences and arts, speech and poetry, action and grace. For whoso dwells in this moral beatitude already anticipates those special powers which men prize so highly. The lover has no talent, no skill, which passes for quite nothing with his enamored maiden, however little she may possess of related faculty, and the heart which abandons itself to the supreme mind finds itself related to all its works. And we travel a royal road to particular knowledge and powers. In ascending to this primary and aboriginal sentiment, we have come from our remote station onto the circumference, instantaneously to the center of the world, where as in the closet of God, we see causes and anticipate the universe, which is but a slow effect. One mode of the divine teaching is the incarnation of the Spirit in a form in forms like my own. I live in society with persons who answer to thoughts in my own mind, or express a certain obedience to the great instincts to which I live. I see its presence to them. I am certified of a common nature, and these other souls, these separated selves, draw me as nothing else can. They stir in me the new emotions we call passion, of love, hatred, fear, admiration, pity. Thence come conversation, competition, persuasion, cities and war. Persons are supplementary to the primary teaching of the soul. In youth, we are mad for persons. Childhood and youth see all the world in them. But the large experience of man discovers the identical nature appearing through them all. Let me repeat that because it's very deep. Childhood and youth see all the world in them. But the larger experience of man discovers the identical nature appearing through them all. Persons themselves acquaint us with the impersonal. In all conversation between two persons, tacit reference is made to a third party, to a common nature. That third party or common nature is not social, it is impersonal, is God. And so in groups where debate is earnest, and especially on high questions, the company become aware that the thought rises to an equal level in all bosoms, that all have a spiritual property. And what was said, as well as the sayer, that all become wiser than they were. It arches over them like a temple, the unity of thought, in which every heart beats with noble sense of power and duty, and thinks and acts with unusual solemnity. All are conscious of attaining to a higher self-possession. It shines for all. There is a certain wisdom of humanity which is common to the greatest men, with the lowest, and which our ordinary education often labors to silence and obstruct. The mind is one, and the best minds who love truth for its own sake think much less of poverty in truth. They accept it thankfully everywhere, and do not label or stamp it with any man's name, for it is theirs long beforehand and from eternity. The learned and the studious of thought have no monopoly of wisdom. Their voice of direction in some degree disqualifies them to think truly. We owe many valuable, I'm going to repeat that. The learned and studious of thought have no monopoly of wisdom. The violence of direction in some degree disqualifies them to think truly. We owe many valuable observations to people who are not very acute or profound, and who say the thing without effort which we want and have long been hunting in vain. The action of the soul is oftener in that which is felt and left unsaid than in that which is said in any conversation. It broods over every society, and they unconsciously seek for it in each other. We know better than we do. We do not possess ourselves, and we know at the same time that we are much more. I feel the same truth. How often in my truly conversation with my neighbors, that somewhat higher, and each of us overlooks this byplay, and Jove nods to Jove from behind each of us. Men descend to meet in their habitual and mean service to the world, for which they forsake their native nobleness. They resemble those Arabian sheikhs who dwell in mean houses and affect an external poverty, to escape the rapacity of the pasha and reserve all the display of wealth for their interior and guarded retirements. As it is present in all persons. So it is in every period of life. It is adult already in the infant man. In my dealing with my child, my Latin and Greek, my accomplishments and my money stead mean nothing. But as much soul as I have avails. If I am wilful, he sets his will against mine, one for one, and leaves me, if I please, the degradation of beating him by my superiority of strength. But if I renounce my will and act for this soul, setting that up as umpire between us two, out of his young eyes looks the same soul. He reveres and loves with me. The soul is a perceiver and revealer of truth. We know truth when he see it. Let skeptic and scoffer say what they choose. Foolish people ask you when you have spoken what they do not wish to hear. How do you know it is truth and not an error of your own? We know truth when we see it. From opinion, as we know when we are awake, that we are awake. It was a grand sentence of Emanuel Swedenborg, which would alone indicate the greatness of that man's perception. Quote, "It is no proof of a man's understanding to be able to affirm whatever he pleases, but to be able to discern that what is true, and what is false is false. That is the mark and character of intelligence." End quote. In the book I read, the good thought returns to me, as every truth will, the image of a whole soul. To the bad thought which I find in it, the same soul becomes a discerning, separating word, sword, and lops it away. We are wiser than we know, if we will not interfere with our thought, but will act entirely or see how the thing stands in God. We know the particular thing, and everything, and every man. For the maker of all things and all persons stands behind us and casts his dread ambitions through us over things. For beyond this recognition of its own in particular passages of the individual experience, it also reveals truth. And here we should seek to reinforce ourselves by its very presence, and to speak with a worthier, loftier strain of that advent. For the soul's communication of truth is the highest event in nature, since it then does not give somewhat from itself, but it gives itself, or passes into and becomes that man whom it enlightens, or in proportion to that truth he receives, it takes him to itself. We distinguish the announcements of the soul, its manifestations of its own nature, by the term revelation. These are always attended by the emotion of the sublime. For this communication is an influx of a divine mind into our mind. It is an ebb of the individual rivulet before the flowing surges of the sea of life. Every distinct apprehension of the central commandment agitates men with awe and delight. A thrill passes through all men at the reception of new truth, or at the performance of a great action which comes out of the heart of nature. In these communications, the power to see is not separated from the will to do, but the insight proceeds from obedience, and obedience proceeds from a joyful perception. Every moment when the individual feels himself invaded by it is memorable. By the necessity of our constitution, a certain enthusiasm attends the individual's consciousness of that divine presence. The character and duration of this enthusiasm vary with the state of the individual, from an ecstasy and trance and prophetic inspiration, which is its rarer appearance, to the faintest glow of virtuous emotion, which form it, warms like our household fires, and all the families and associations of men, and makes society possible. A certain tendency to insanity has always attended the opening of the religious sense in men, as if they had been, quote, blasted with excess of light, end quote. The trances of Socrates, the, quote, union, end quote, of Plotinus, the vision of Porphyry, the conversion of Paul, the aurora of Beeman, the convulsions of George Fox and his Quakers, the illumination of Swedenborg are of this kind. What was, in the case of these remarkable persons, a ravishment, has in innumerable instances in common life been exhibited in less striking manner. Everywhere the history of religion betrays a tendency to enthusiasm. The rapture of the Moravian and Quietist, the opening of the eternal sense of the word, and the language of the New Jerusalem church, the revival of the Calvinistic churches, the experiences of the Methodists, of varying forms of that shudder of awe and delight with which the individual soul always mingles with the universal soul. The nature of these revelations is the same. They are perceptions of the absolute law. They are solutions to the soul's own questions. They do not answer the questions which the understanding asks. The soul answers never by words, but by the thing itself that it is inquired after. Revelation is the disclosure of the soul. The popular notion of a revelation is that it is a telling of fortunes. In past oracles of the soul, understanding seeks to find answers to sensual questions, and understands and undertakes to tell from God how long men shall exist, what their lands shall do, and who shall be their company, adding names and dates and places. But we must pick no locks. We must check the slow curiosity. An answer in words is delusive. It is really no answer to the questions you ask. Do not require a description of the countries toward which you sail. The description does not describe them to you. And tomorrow you arrive there and know them by inhabiting them. Men are concerning the immortality of the soul, the employments of heaven, the state of the sinner, and so forth. They even dream that Jesus has left replies to precisely these interrogations. Never a moment. The sublime spirits speak in the patois, the truth, justice, love, the attributes of the soul, the idea of immutableness is essentially associated. Jesus, living in these moral sentiments, heedless of sensual fortunes, heeding only the manifestations of these, never made the separation of the idea of duration from the essence of these attributes, nor uttered a syllable concerning the duration of the soul. It was left to his disciples to sever duration from the moral elements, and to teach the immortality of the soul as a doctrine and maintain it by evidences. The moment the doctrine of the immortality is separately taught, man is already fallen. In the flowing of love, in the adoration of humility, there is no question of continuance. No inspired man ever asks this question or condenses to these evidences. No inspired man ever asks this question or condescends to these evidences, for the soul is true to itself, and the man in whom it is shed abroad cannot wander from the present, which is infinite, to a future which would be finite. These questions which we lust to ask about the future are a confession of sin. God has no answer for them. No answer in words can reply to a question of things. It is not an arbitrary, quote, decree of God, end quote, but in the nature of man, that a veil shuts down on the facts of tomorrow. For the soul will not have us read any other cipher than that of cause and effect. By this veil, which curtains events, it instructs the children of men to live today. The only mode of obtaining an answer to these questions of the senses is to forgo all low curiosity and accept the tide of being which floats us into the secret of nature. Work and live, and all unawares of the advancing soul has built and forged for itself a new condition, and the question and the answer are one. By the same fire, vital, consecrating, celestial, which burns until it shall dissolve all things into the waves and surges of an ocean of light, we see and know each other, and what spirit each is of. Who can tell the grounds of his knowledge of the character of the several individuals in his circle of friends? No man. Yet their acts and words do not disappoint him. And that man, though he know no ill of him, he put no trust in that other, though they had seldom met. Authentic signs had yet passed, to signify that he might be trusted as one who had an interest in his own character. We know each other very well. Which of us has been just to himself, and whether that which we teach, our behold, is only an inspiration, or is our honest effort also. We are all discerners of spirits. The diagnosis lies in a luft. Beg your pardon. That diagnosis lies aloft in our life or consciousness power. That diagnosis lies aloft in our life or our unconscious power. The intercourse of society, its trade, its religion, its friendship, its quarrels, is one wide judicial investigation of character, in full court or in small committee, or confronted face to face, accuser and accused. Men offer themselves to be judged. Against their will, they exhibit those decisive trifles by which character is read. But who judges? And what? Not our understanding. We do not read them by learning or craft. No, the wisdom of the wise man consists herein. And he does not judge them. He lets them judge themselves, and merely reads and records their own verdict. By virtue of this inevitable nature, private will is overpowered, and mockery, our efforts of our imperfections, your genius will speak from you, and mine from you. That which we are, we shall teach, not voluntarily, but involuntarily. Thoughts come into our minds by avenues which we never left open, and thoughts go out of our minds through avenues which we never voluntarily opened. Character teaches over our heads. The infallible index of true progress is found in the tone of the man. In the tone the man takes. I'm going to repeat that. The infallible index of true progress is found in the tone of the man. I have to repeat that. The infallible index of true progress is found in the tone the man takes. Neither his age, nor his breeding, nor company, nor books, nor actions, nor talents, nor altogether can hinder him from being differential to a higher spirit than his own. If he have not found his home in God, his manners, his forms of speech, the turn of his sentences, the build, shall I say, all his opinions will involuntarily confess it. Let him brave it out, how he will. If we have found his center, the deity will shine through him, through all the disguises of ignorance, of ungenial temperament, of unfavorable circumstance. The tone of seeking is one, and the tone of having it is another. The great distinction between teachers, sacred or literacy, between poets like Herbert and poets like Pope, between philosophers like Spinoza, Kant and Coleridge, and philosophers like Locke, Paley, Mackintosh and Stewart, between men of the world who are reckoned accomplished talkers, and here and there a fervent mystic, prophesying, half insane, under the infinitude of his thought, is that one class speak from within, or from experience, as parties and possessor of the fact, and the other class from without, as spectators merely or perhaps as acquainted with the fact on the evidence of third persons. It is of no use to preach to me from without. I can do that too, easily myself. Jesus speaks always from within, and in a degree that transcends all others. And that is the miracle, I believe. Beforehand, that it ought to be. All men stand continually in the expectation of the appearance of such a teacher. But if a man do not speak from within, the veil, where the word is one, with that it tells of. Let him lowly confess. The same omniscience flows into the intellect and makes what we call genius. Much of the wisdom of the world is not wisdom, and the most illuminated class of men are no doubt superior to literary fame and are not writers. Among the multitude of scholars and authors we feel no howling presence. We are sensible of a knack and skill rather than of inspiration. They have a light and know not whence it comes, and call it their own. That talent is some exaggerated faculty, some overgrown member, so that the strength is a disease. In these instances, the intellectual gifts do not make the impression of virtue, but almost of vice. And we feel that a man's talents stand in the way of his advancement in truth. But genius is religious. It is a larger imbibing of the common heart. It is not anomalous, but more like and not less like other men. There is in all great poets a wisdom of humanity which is superior to any talents. They exercise. The author, the wit, the partisan, the fine gentleman does not take place of the man. Humanity shines in Homer and Chaucer, in Spenser and Shakespeare and Milton. They are content with truth. They use the positive degree. They seem frigid and phlegmatic to those who have been spiced with the frantic passion and violent coloring of inferior but popular writers. For they are poets by the free course which they allow the informing soul, which through their eyes beholds again and blesses things which it has made. The soul is superior of its knowledge, wiser than any of its works. The great poet makes us feel our own wealth, and then we think less of his compositions. His best communication to our mind is to teach us to despise all he has done. Shakespeare carries us to such a lofty strain of intelligent activity as to suggest a wealth which beggars his own. And we then feel that the splendid works which he has created and which in other hours we extol as a sort of self-existent poetry take no stronger hold of real nature than the shadow of a passing traveller on the rock. The inspiration which uttered itself in Hamlet and Lear could utter things as good from day to day forever. Why then should I make account of Hamlet and Lear, as if we had not the soul, from which they fell as syllables from the tongue. This energy does not descend into individual life or any other condition than entire possession. It comes to the lowly and simple. It comes to whomsoever will put off what is foreign and proud. It comes as insight. It comes as serenity and grandeur. When we see those whom it inhabits, we are apprised of new degrees of greatness. From that inspiration, the man comes back with a changed tone. He does not talk with men with an eye to their opinion. He tries them. It requires of us to be plain and true. The vain traveller attempts to embellish his life by quoting my lord and the prince and the countess, who thus said or did to him. The ambitious vulgar show you their spoons and brooches and rings and preserve their cards and compliments. The more cultivated in their account of their own experience cull out the pleasing poetic circumstance. The visit to Rome, the man of genius they saw, the brilliant friend they know, still further, or perhaps the gorgeous landscape, the mountain lights, the mountain thoughts they enjoyed yesterday, and to seek to throw a romantic color over their life. But the soul that ascends to worship the great God is plain and true, has no rose color, no fine friends, no chivalry, no adventures, does not want admiration, dwells in the hour that now is, in the earnest experience of the common day, by reason of the present moment, and the mere trifle having become porous to thought and bibulous of the sea of light. Converse with a mind that is grandly simple, and literature looks like word-catching. The simplest utterances are worthiest to be written, yet they are so cheap, and so things of course, that in the infinite riches of the soul, it is like gathering a few pebbles off the ground, a bottling a little air in a phial, when the whole earth and the whole atmosphere are ours. Nothing can pass there. Oh, make you one of the circle, but the casting aside your trappings and dealing man to man in naked truth, plain confession, and omniscient affirmation. Souls such as these treat you as gods would, walk as gods in the earth, accepting without any admiration your wit, your bounty, your virtue even. Say rather your active duty, for your virtue they own as a proper blood. The royals themselves, an over-royal, and the father of the gods. But what rebuke the plain fraternal bearing casts on the mutual flattery with which authors solace each other and wound themselves? These flatter not. I do not wonder that these men go to see Cromwell and Christina and Charles II and James I and the Grand Turk, for they are in their own elevation the fellows of kings, and must feel the servile tone of conversation in the world. They must always be a godsend to princes, for they confront them, a king to a king, without ducking or concession, and give a high nature the refreshment and satisfaction of resistance of plain humanity, of even companionship, and of new ideas. They leave them wiser and superior men. Souls like these make us feel that sincerity is more excellent than flattery. Deal so plainly with man and woman, as to constrain the utmost sincerity and destroy all hope of trifling with you. It is the highest compliment you can pay, the highest praising, said Milton, is, quote, not flattery, and the plainest advice is a kind of praising, end quote. Ineffable is the union of man and God in every act of the soul. The simplest person who in his integrity worships God becomes God. Yet forever and ever the influx of the better and universal self is new and unsearchable. It inspires awe and astonishment. How dear, how soothing to man arises the idea of God, peopling the lonely place, effacing the scars of our mistakes and disappointments. When we have broken our God of tradition and ceased from our God of rhetoric, then may God fire the heart with his presence. It is the doubling of the heart itself, nay, the infinite enlargement of the heart with a power of growth to a new infinity on every side. It inspires in man an infallible trust. He has not the conviction, but the sight, that the best is the true, and many in that thought easily dismiss all particular uncertainties and fears, and adjourn to the sure revelation of time the solution of his private riddles. He is sure that his welfare is dear to the heart of being. In the presence of law, to his mind he is overflowed with a reliance so universal that it sweeps away all cherished hopes and the most stable projects of mortal condition in its flood. He believes that he cannot escape from his good. The things that are really for thee, gratitude to thee. You are running to seek your friend. Let your feet run, but your mind need not. If you do not find him, will you not acquiesce that it is best you should not find him? For there is a power which, as it is in you, is in him also, and could therefore very well bring you together. If it were for the best, you are preparing with eagerness to go and render a service to which your talent and your taste invite you. The love of men and the hope of fame, has it not occurred to you that you have no right to go unless you are equally willing to be prevented from going? Oh, believe, as thou livest, that every sound that is spoken over the round world, which thou oughtest to hear, will vibrate on thine ear. Every proverb, every book, every byword that belongs to thee for aid or comfort shall surely come home through open, winding passages. Every friend whom not life fantastic will, but the great and tender heart in the cave craveth, shall act in his embrace, and this because the heart is thee. And this because the heart in thee is the heart of all, not a valve, not a wall, not an intersection. Is there anywhere in nature but one blood rolls uninterruptedly, an endless circulation through all men, as the water of the globe is all one sea, and truly seen its tide is one. Let man then learn the revelation of all nature and all thought in his heart. This namely the highest dwells with him, that the souls of nature are in his own mind, if the sentiment of duty is dear. But if he would know what the great God speaketh, he must go into his closet and shut the door. As Jesus said, God will not make himself manifest to cowards. He must greatly listen to himself, withdrawing himself from all the accents of other men's devotion. Even their prayer are hurtful to him until he have made his own. Our religion vulgarly stands on numbers of believers. Whenever the appeal is made, no matter how indirectly, to numbers, proclamation is then and there made that religion is not. He that find God a sweet enveloping thought to him never counts his company. When I sit in that presence, who shall dare to come in? When I sit in perfect humility, when I burn with pure love, what can Calvin or Swedenborg say? It makes no difference whether the appeal is to numbers or to one. The faith that stands on authority is not faith. The reliance on authority measures the decline of religion. The withdrawal of the soul, the position that men have given to Jesus, now for many centuries of history, is a position of authority. It characterizes themselves. It cannot alter the eternal facts. Great is the soul and plain. It is no flatterer. It is no follower. It never peels from itself. It believes in itself. Before the immense possibility of man, all mere experience, all past biography, however spotless and sainted, shrinks away. Before the heaven with our presentiments foreshow us, we cannot easily praise any form of life we have seen or read of. We not only affirm that we have few great men, but absolutely speaking, that we have none, that we have no history, no record of any character or mode of living that entirely contents us. The saints and demigods whom history worships, we are constrained to accept with a grain of allowance. Though in our lonely hours we draw a new strength out of their memory, yet pressed on our attention as they are by the faultless and customary, they fatigue and invade. The soul gives itself, alone, original, and pure, to the lonely, original, and pure, who on that condition gladly inhabits, leads, and speaks through it. Then is it glad, young, and nimble. It is not wise, but it sees through all things. It is not co-religious, but it is innocent. It calls the light its own, and feels that the grass grows and the stone falls by a law inferior to, and depend on, its nature. Behold, it saith, I am born into the great, the universal mind. I, the perfect, adore my own perfect. I am somehow receptive of the great soul, and thereby I do overlook the sun and the stars, and feel them to be the fair accidents and effects which change and pass. More and more the surges of everlasting nature enter into me, and I become public and human in my regards and actions. Succumb I to live in thoughts and act with energies which are immortal, thus revering the soul and learning, as the ancients said, that, quote, its beauty is immense, end quote. Man will come to see that the world is a perennial miracle which the soul worketh, and be less astonished at particular wonders. He will learn that there is no profane history, that all history is sacred, that the universe is represented in an atom, in a moment of time. He will weave no longer spotted life, or shreds and patches, but he will live with a divine unity. He will cease from what is base and frivolous in his life, and be content with all places, with any service he can render. He will calmly front the morrow in the negligency of that trust which carries God with it, and so hath already the whole future in the bottom of the heart. The book The Oversoul is now finished. That was on page 278. We shall now carry on to the next book called Circles. We're now on page 279. Please leave your feedback. I look forward to hearing from you. Circles. Nature centers into balls, and her proud ephemerals, fast to surface and outside. Scan the protyle of the sphere. Knew they what that signified. A new Genesis were here. Let me repeat that. Circles. Nature centers into balls, and her proud ephemerals, fast to surface and outside. Scan the profile of the sphere. Knew they what that signified. A new Genesis were here. The eye is the first circle. The horizon which it forms is the second. And throughout nature, this primary figure is repeated without end. It is the highest emblem in the cipher of the world. St. Augustine described the nature of God as a circle whose center was everywhere and its circumference nowhere. We are all our lifetime reading the copious sense of the first of forms. One moral we have already deduced in considering the circular or compensatory character of every human action. Another analogy we shall now trace, that every action admits of being outdone. Our life is an apprenticeship to the truth, that around every circle another can be drawn, that there is no end in nature, but every end is a beginning, that there is always another dawn, risen or mid-noon, and under every deep a lower deep opens. This fact, as far as it symbolizes the moral fact of the unattainable, the flying perfect around with the hands of man, can never meet at once the inspirer and the condemner of every success, may conveniently serve us to connect many illustrations of human power in every department. There are no fixtures in nature. The universe is fluid and volatile. Permanence is but a word of degrees. Our globe, for that matter, our globe, seen by God, is a transparent law, not a mass of facts. The law dissolves the facts and holds it fluid. Our culture is the predominance of an idea which draws after it this train of cities and institutions. Let us rise into another idea. They will disappear. The Greek sculpture is all melted away, as if it had been statues of ice. Here and there a solitary figure or fragment remaining, as we see flecks and scraps of snow left in the cold dells, and mountain clefts in June and July. For genius that created it creates now somewhat else. The Greek letters last a little longer, but are already passing under the same sentence, and tumbling into the inevitable pit which the creation of new thought opens for all that is old. The new continents are built out of the ruins of an old planet. The new races fed out of the decomposition of the foregoing. New arts destroy the old, seeing the investment of capital in aqueducts made useless by hydraulics, fortifications by gunpowder, roads and canals by railways, sails by steam, steam by electricity. You admire this tower of granite, weathering the hurts of so many ages. Yet a little waving hand built this huge wall, and that which builds is better than that which is built. The hand that can build can topple it down much faster, better than the hand, and nimbler was invisible thought which wrought through it, and thus ever behind the cause effect is a fine cause which, being narrowly seen, in itself the effect of a finer cause. Everyone looks permanent until its secret is known. A rich estate appears to women a firm and lasting fact. To a merchant, one easily created out of any materials and easily lost. An orchard goes tillage. Good grounds seem a fixture like a gold mine, or a river to a citizen. But to a large farmer, not much more fixed than the state of the crop, nature looks provokingly stable and secular. But it has a cause like all the rest. And when once I comprehend that, will these fields stretch so immovably wide? These leaves hang so individually considerable. Permanence is a word of degrees. Everything is medial. Moons are no more bounds to spiritual power than bat balls. The key to every man is his thought, sturdy and defying. Though he has a helm which he obeys, which is the idea after which all his facts are classified. He can only be reformed by showing him a new idea which commands his own. The life of man is a self-evolving circle, which from a ring imperceptibly small rushes on all sides outward to new and larger circles. And with that end, the extent to which the generation of circles, wheel without wheel, will go depends on the force of truth of the individual soul, for it is the inner effort of each thought, having formed itself into a circular wave of circumstance, as for instance an empire, rules of an art, a local usage, a religious rite, to heap itself on that ridge and to solidify and hem in the life. But if the soul is quick and strong, it bursts over that boundary on all sides and expands another orbit on the great deep, which also runs up into a high wave with attempt again to stop and to bind. But the heart refuses to be imprisoned in its first and narrowest pulses. It already tends outward with a vast force and too immense and innumerable expansions. Every ultimate fact is only the fact of a new series. Every general law only a particular fact of some more general law, presently to disclose itself. There is no outside, no enclosing wall, no circumference to us. The man finishes his story. How good, how final, how it puts a new face in all things. He fills the sky. Lo, on the other side rises also a man and draws a circle around the circle we had just pronounced, the outline of the sphere. Then already is our first speaker, not man, but only a first speaker. His only redress is forthwith to draw a circle outside of his antagonist. And so men so do by themselves the result of today, which haunts the mind and cannot be escaped, will presently be abridged into a word, and the principle that seemed to explain nature will itself be included as one example of a bolder generalization. In the thought of tomorrow, there is a power to upheave all the creeds, all the literatures of the nations, and marshal thee to a heaven which no epic dream has yet depicted. Every man is not so much a workman in the world as he is a suggestion of that he should be. Men walk as prophecies of the next age. Step by step, we scale this mysterious ladder. The steps are actions. The new prospect is power. Every several result is threatened and judged by that which follows. Everyone seems to be contradicted by the new. It is only limited by the new. The new statement is always hated by the old. And to those dwelling in the old, comes like an abyss of skepticism. But the eye soon gets wonted to it, for the I and it are effects of one cause. Then its innocency and benefit appear, and presently all its energy spent, it pales and dwindles before the revelation of the new hour. Fear not the new generalization. Does a fact look crass and material, threatening to degrade thy theory of spirit? Resist it not. It goes to refine and raise thy theory of matter just as much. There are no fixtures to men. If we appeal to consciousness, every man supposes himself not to be fully understood, and if there is any truth in him, if he rests at last on the divine soul, I see not how it can be otherwise. The last chamber, last closet, he must feel was never open. There is always a residuum, unknown, unanalyzable. That is, every man believes that he has a greater possibility. Our moods do not believe in each other. Today I'm full of thoughts, and can write what I please. I see no reason why I should not have the same thought, the same power of expression tomorrow. What I write, while I write it, seems the most natural thing in the world. But yesterday I saw a dreary vacuity in this direction, in which now I see so much. And a month hence, I doubt not, I shall wonder who he was that wrote so many continuous pages. Alas, for this infirm faith, this will not strenuous, this vast ebb of a vast flow. I am God in nature, I am weed by the wall. The continual effort to raise himself above himself, to work a pitch above his last height, betrays itself in a man's relations. We thirst for approbation, you cannot forgive the approver. The sweet of nature is love, yet if I have a friend, I am tormented by my imperfections. The love of me accuses the other party. If he were high enough to slight me, then could I love him and rise by my affection to new heights? A man's growth is seen in the successive choirs of his friends. For every friend whom he loses for truth, he gains a better. I thought as I walked in the woods and mused on my friends, why should I play with them this game of idolatry? I know and see too well. We're not voluntarily blind. The speedy limits of persons called high and worthy, rich, noble, and great, they are, by the liberality of our speech. But truth is sad. O blessed Spirit, whom I forsake for these, they are not thou. Every personal consideration that as we allow costs us heavenly state, we sell the thrones of angels for a short and turbulent pleasure. How often must we learn this lesson? Men cease to interest us when we find their limitations. The only sin is limitation. I'm going to repeat that again. How often must we learn this lesson? Men cease to interest us when we find their limitations. The only sin is limitation. As soon as you once come up with a man's limitations, it is all over with him. Has he talents? Has he enterprise? Has he knowledge? It boots not. Infinitely alluring and attractive was he to you yesterday, a great hope, a sea to swim in. Now you have found his shores, found a pond, and you care not if you never see it again. Each new step we take in thought reconciles 20 seemingly discordant facts as expressions of one law. Aristotle and Plato are reckoned the respective heads of two schools. A wise man will see that Aristotle platonizes. By going one step farther back in thought, discordant opinions are reconciled by being seen to be two extremes of one principle, and we can never go so far back as to preclude a still higher vision. Beware when the great God lets loose a thinker on this planet. Then all things are at risk. It is as when a conflagration has broken out in a great city, and no man knows what is safe or where it will end. There is not a piece of science but its flank may be turned tomorrow. There is not any literary reputation, not the so-called eternal names of fame, that may not be revised and condemned. The very hopes of man, the thoughts of his heart, the religion of nations, the manners and morals of mankind are all at the mercy of a new generalization. Generalization is always a new influx of the divinity into the mind, hence the thrill that attends it. Valor consists of the power of self-discovery, so that man cannot have his flask turned, cannot be out-generaled, but put him where you will, he stands. This can only be by his preferring truth to his past apprehension of truth and his alert acceptance of it from whatever quarter. The intrepid conviction that his laws, his relation to society, his Christianity, his world, may at any time be superseded and diseased. There are degrees in idealism. We learn first to play with it academically, as the magnet was once a toy. Then we see, in the heyday of youth and poetry, that it may be true. That it is true in gleams and fragments, then its countenance waxes stern and grand, and we see that it must be true. It now shows itself ethical and practical. We learn that God is, that He is me. We learn that God is, that He is in me, and that all things are shadows of Him. The idealism of Berkeley is only a crude statement of the idealism of Jesus. And that again is a crude statement of the fact that all nature is the rapid efflux of goodness, executing and organizing itself. Much more obviously is history and the state of the world at any time. Directly dependent on the intellectual classification then existing in the minds of men. The things which are dear to men at this hour are so on account of the ideas which have emerged on their mental horizon, and which cause the present order of things, as a tree bears its apples, a new degree of culture would instantly revolutionize the entire system of human pursuits. Conversation is a game of circles. In conversation we pluck up the termini which bound the common of silence on every side. The particles are not to be judged by this spirit. They partake and even express under this Pentecost. Tomorrow they will have receded from this high water mark. Tomorrow you shall find them stooping under the old pack saddles. Yet let us enjoy the cloven flame whilst it glows on your walls. When each new speaker strikes a new light, emancipates us from the oppression of the last speaker to oppress us with the greater and exclusiveness of his own thought, then yields us to another Redeemer. We seem to recover our rights to become men. Oh, what truths profound and executable only in ages and orbs are supposed in the announcement of every truth. In common hours, society sits cold and statuesque. We all stand waiting, empty, knowing possibly that we can be fully surrounded by mighty symbols which are not symbols to us, but prose and trivial toys. Then cometh the God and converts the statues into fiery men, and by a flash of his eye burns up the veil which shrouded all things. And the meaning and the very fortune of cup and saucer, of chair and clock and tester is manifest. The facts which loomed so large in the fogs of yesterday, property, climate, breeding, personal beauty, and the like, have strangely changed their proportions. All that we reckoned settled shakes and rattles, and literature, cities, climates, religions leave their foundation and dance before our eyes. And yet, here again, see the swift circumscription. Good is the discourse, good as is discourse. Silence is better, and shames it. The length of the discourse indicates the distance of thought betwixt the speaker and the hearer. If they were at a perfect understanding in any part, no words would be necessary thereon. If at one in all parts, no words would be suffered. Literature is a point outside of our hodiernal circle, through which a new one may be described. The use of literature is to afford us a platform whence we may command a view of our present life, a purchase by which we may move it we fill ourselves with ancient learning, install ourselves the best we can in Greek and Punic and Roman houses, only that we may wiselier see French, English, and American houses and modes of living. In like manner, we see literature best from the midst of wild nature, or from the din of affairs, or from a higher religion. The field cannot be well seen from within the field. The astronomer must have his diameter of the Earth's orbit as a base to find the parallax of any star. Therefore we value the poet. All the argument and all the wisdom is not the encyclopedia, or the treatise, or metaphysics, or the body of divinity, but the sonnet or the play. In my daily work, I incline to repeat my old steps, and do not believe in remedial force and the power of change and reform. But some Petrarch or Aristotle, filled with the new wine of his imagination, writes me an ode or a brisk romance, full of daring thought and action. He smites and arouses me with his shrill tones, breaks up my whole chain of habits, and I open my eye on my own possibilities. He clasps wings to the side of all the stall's old lumber of the world, and I am capable once more of choosing a straight path in theory and practice. We have the same need to command a view of the religion of the world. We can never see Christianity from the catechism, from the pastures, from a boat in the pond, from amidst the songs of wood birds we possibly may. Cleansed by the elemental light and wind, steeped in the sea of beautiful forms, which the field offers us, we may chance to cast a right glance back upon biography. Christianity is rightly dear to the best of mankind, yet was there never a young philosopher whose breeding had fallen into the Christian church, by whom that brave text of Paul was not specially prized? Quote, then shall also the Son be subject unto him, who put all things under him, that God may be all in all. End quote. Let the claims and virtues of persons be never so great and welcome. The instinct of man presses eagerly onward to the impersonal and illimitable, and gladly arms himself against the dogmatism of bigots with this generous word out of the book itself. The natural world may be conceived of a system of concentric circles, and we now and then detect in nature slight dislocations which apprise us that the surface on which we now stand is not fixed but sliding. These manifold tenacious qualities, this chemistry and vegetation, these metals and animals which seem to stand there for their own sake, are means and methods only, are words of God, and as fugitive as other words. Has a naturalist or chemist learned his craft, who has explored the gravity of atoms and the elective affinities, who has not yet discerned the deeper law whereof this is only a partial or approximate statement, namely, that like draws to like, and that the goods which belong to you gravitate to you, and need not be pursued with pains and cost? Yet, is that statement approximate also, and not final? Omnipresence is a higher fact, not through subtle subterranean channels need friend and fact be drawn to the counterpart, but rightly considered, these things proceed from the eternal generation of the soul. Cause and effect are two sides of one fact. The same law of eternal procession ranges all that we call the virtues, and extinguishes each in the light of the better. The great man will not be prudent in the popular sense. All his prudence will be so much deduction from his grandeur. But it behooves each to see, when he sacrifices prudence to what God he devotes it. If to ease and pleasure, he had better be prudent still. If to a great trust, he can well spare his mule and panniers wide wind's chariot instead. Geoffrey draws on his boots to go through the woods, that his feet may be safer from the bite of the snakes. Aaron never thinks of such a peril, and many years neither is harmed by such an accident. Yet it seems to me, with every precaution you take against such an evil, you put yourself into the power of the evil. I suppose that the highest prudence is the lowest prudence. Is this too sudden a rushing from the center to the verge of our orbit? Think how many times we shall fall back into pitiful calculations before we take up our rest in the great sentiment, or make the verge of today the new center. Besides, your bravest sentiment is familiar to the humblest men. The poor and the low have their way of expressing the last facts of philosophy as well as you. Quote, blessed be nothing. And quote, the worse things are, the better they are. End quote. The Proverbs which expresses the transcendentalism of common life. One man's justice is another's injustice. One man's beauty is another's ugliness. One man's wisdom, another's folly. As one beholds the same objects from a higher point, one man thinks justice consists in paying debts and has no measure in his abhorrence of another who is very remiss in this duty and makes the creditor wait tediously. But the second man has his own way of looking at things, asks himself, which debt must I pay first? The debt to the rich or the debt to the poor? The debt of money or the debt of thought to mankind? Of genius to nature? For you, O broker, there is no other principle but arithmetic. For me, commerce is of trivial import. Love, faith, truth of character, the aspiration of man, these are sacred. Nor can I detach one duty, like you, from all other duties, and concentrate my forces mechanically on the payment of monies. Let me live onward. You shall find that though slower, the progress of my character will liquidate all these debts without injustice to higher claims. If a man should dedicate himself to the payment of notes, would not this be injustice? Does he owe no debt but money? And are all claims to him to be postponed to a landlord's or a banker's? There is no virtue which is final. All are initial. The virtues of society are vices of the saint. The terror of reform is the discovery that we must cast away our virtues, or what we have always esteemed such, into the same pit that has consumed our grosser vices. Quote, forgive his crimes, forgive his virtues too. Those smaller faults have converts to the right. End quote. It is the higher power of divine moments that they abolish our contritions also. I accuse myself of sloth and unprofitableness day by day. But when these waves of God flow into me, I no longer reckon lost time. I no longer poorly compute my possible achievement by what remains to me in the month of the year. For these moments confer a sort of omnipresence and omnipotence, which asks nothing of duration, but sees that the energy of the mind is commensurate with the work done without time. And thus, O circular philosopher, I hear some reader exclaim, you have arrived at a fine Pyrrhonism, at an equivalence and indifferency of all actions, and would fain teach us that if we are true for us of our crimes, may be lively stones, out of which we shall construct the temple of the true God. I am not careful to justify myself. I am gladdened by seeing the predominance of the saccharine principle throughout vegetable nature, and not less by beholding in morals that unrestrained inundation of the principle of good into every chink and hole that selfishness has left open, yea, into selfishness and sin itself, so that no evil is pure, nor hell itself, without its extreme satisfaction. But lest I should mislead any when I have my own head and obey my whims, let me remind the reader that I am only an experimenter. Do not set the least value on what I do, or the least discredit on what I do not. If I pretend to settle anything as true or false, I unsettle all things. No facts are to me sacred. None are profane. I simply experiment an endless seeker with no past at my back. Yet this incessant movement and progression which all things partake could never become sensible to us, but by contrast to some principle of fixture of stability in the soul, whilst the eternal generation of circles proceeds, the eternal generator abides. The central life is somewhat superior to creation, superior to knowledge and thought, and contains all its circles. Forever labors to create a life and thought as large and excellent as itself, but in vain, for that which is made instructs how to make a better. Thus there is no sleep, no pause, no preservation, but all things renew, germinate, and spring. Why should we import rags and relics into the new hour? Nature abhors the old, and old age seems the only disease. All others run into this one. We call it by many names: fever, intemperance, insanity, stupidity, and crime. They are all forms of old age. They are rest, conservatism, appropriation, inertia, not newness, not the way onward. We grizzle every day. I see no need of it. Whilst we converse with what is above us, we do not grow old, but grow young. Infancy, youth receptive. Infancy, youth, receptive, aspiring, with religious eye. Look upwards. Look upward, counts itself nothing, and abandons itself to the instruction flowing from all sides. But the man and woman of 70 assume to know all. They have outlived their hope. They renounce aspiration, accept the actual for the necessary, and talk down to the young. Let them then become organs of the Holy Ghost. Let them be lovers. Let them behold truth. And their eyes are uplifted, their wrinkles smoothed. They are perfumed again with hope and power. This old age ought not to creep on a human mind. In nature, every moment is new. The past is always swallowed and forgotten. The coming only is sacred. Nothing is secure but life, transition, the energizing spirit. No love can be bound by oath or covenant to secure it against a higher love. No truth so sublime, but it may be trivial tomorrow and the light of new thoughts. People wish to be settled only as far as they are unsettled. Is there any hope for them? Life is a series of surprises. We do not guess today the mood, the pleasure, the power of tomorrow. When we are building up our being, of low estates, of acts of routine and sense, we can tell somewhat by the masterpieces of God, the total growths and universal movements of the soul. He hideth, they are incalculable. I can know that truth is divine and helpful, but how it shall help me, I can have no guess. For so to be is the sole inlet of so to know. The new position of the advancing man has all the powers of the old, yet has them all new. It carries in its bosom all the energies of the past, yet it is itself an exhalation of the morning. I cast away in this new movement all my once hoarded knowledge, as vacant and vain. Now for the first time seem I to know anything rightly. The simplest words we do not know what they mean, except when we love and aspire. The difference between talents and character is adroitness, to keep the old untrodden around, and power and courage to make a new road to new and better goals. Character makes an overpowering present, a cheerful determined hour, which fortifies all the company by making them much as possible an excellence that was not thought of. Character dulls the impression of particular events. When we see the conqueror, we do not think much of any one battle or success. We see that we had exaggerated the difficulty. It was easy to him. The great man is not convulsible or tormentable. Events pass for him and without much impression. People say sometimes, "See what I have overcome. See how cheerful I am. See how completely I have triumphed over these black events." Not if they still remind me of the black event. True conquest is the causing of calamity to fade and disappear, as an early cloud of insignificant results in a history so large and advancing. The only thing which we seek with insatiable desire is to forget ourselves, to be surprised out of our propriety, to lose our sempiternal memory, and to do something without knowing how or why. In short, to draw a new circle, nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. The way of life is wonderful. It is by abandonment. The great moments of history are the facilities of performance, through the strength of ideas, as the works of genius and religion. A man, said Oliver Cromwell, never rises so high as when he knows not whither he is going. Dreams and drunkenness, the use of opium and alcohol, are the semi-balance and counterfeit of his oracular genius, and hence their dangerous attraction for men. For the like reason they ask the aid of wild passions, as in gaming and war, to ape, in some manner, these flames and generosities of the heart. So we just finished page 291. 290 actually. Now we're on to page 291. Intellect. Go speed the stars of... I'm going to read that again. Intellect. Go. Speed the Intellect. Go. Speed the stars of thought on their shining goals. The sower scatters broad his seed. The wheat thou stewest be souls. Every substance is negatively electric to that which stands above it in the chemical tables, positively to that which stands below it. Water dissolves wood and iron and salt. Air dissolves water. Electric fire dissolves air, but the intellect dissolves fire. Gravity, laws, method, and the subtlest, unnamed relations of nature in its resistless men's sharp. Intellect is a simple power anterior to all action or construction. Gladly would I unfold in calm degrees a natural history of the intellect, but what man has yet been able to mark the steps and boundaries of that transparent essence? First questions are always to be asked, and the wisest doctor is gravelled by the inquisitiveness of a child. How can we speak of the action of the mind under any divisions, as of its knowledge, of its ethics, of its works, and so forth, since it melts will into perception, knowledge into act? Each becomes the other. Itself alone is. Its vision is not like the vision of the eye, but its union with things known. Intellect and intellection signify to the common ear consideration of abstract truth, the consideration of time and place, of you and me, of profit and hurt, tyrannize over most men's minds. Intellect separates the fact considered from you, from all local and personal reference, and discerns it as if it existed for its own sake. Heraclitus looked upon the affections as dense and colored mists. In the fog of good and evil affections, it is hard for man to walk forward in a straight line. Intellect is void of affection and sees an abstract as it stands in the light of science, cool and disengaged. The intellect goes out of the individual, floats over its own personality, and regards it as a fact, as not as I and mine. He who is immersed in what concerns person or place cannot see the problem of existence. This intellect always ponders. Nature shows all things formed and bound. The intellect pierces the form, overleaps the wall, detects intrinsic likeness between remote things, and reduces all things into a few principles. Making a fact the subject of thought raises it. All that mass of all that mass of mental and moral phenomena which we do not make objects of voluntary thought come within the power of fortune. I'm going to repeat that. All that mass of mental and moral phenomena which we do not make objects of voluntary thought come within the power of fortune. They constitute the circumstance of daily life. They are subject to change, to fear, and hope. Every man beholds his human condition with a degree of melancholy. As a ship aground is battered by the waves, so man imprisoned in mortal life lies open to the mercy of coming events. But a truth separated by the intellect is no longer a subject of destiny. We behold it as a God unpraised above care and fear. And so, any fact in our life, or any record of our fancies or reflections, disentangled from the web of our unconsciousness, becomes an object, impersonal and immortal. It is the past restored, but embalmed. A better art from that of Egypt has taken fear and corruption out of it. It is eviscerated of care. It is offered for science. What is addressed to us for contemplation does not threaten us, but makes us intellectual beings. The growth of the intellect is spontaneous. And every expansion, the mind that grows could not predict the times, the means, the mode of that spontaneity. God enters by a private door into every individual. Long prior to the age of reflection is the thinking of the mind. Out of darkness it came insensibly into the marvelous light of today. In the period of infancy, it accepted and disposed of all impressions from the surrounding creation after its own. Whatever any mind doth or saith is after a law, and this native law remains over it, and after it has come to reflection of conscious thought. In the most worn, pedantic, introverted, self-tormented life, the greatest part is incalculable by him, unforeseen, unimaginable, and must be until he can take himself up by his own ears. What am I? What has my will done to make me that I am? Nothing. I have been floated into this thought, this hour, this connection by of events, by secret currents of might and mind, and my ingenuity and willfulness have not thwarted, have not aided to an appreciable degree. Our spontaneous action is always the best. You cannot, with your best deliberation and heed, come so close to any question as your spontaneous glance shall bring you, whilst you rise from your bed, or walk abroad in the morning after meditating the matter before sleep on the previous night. Our thinking is a pious reception. Our truth of thought is therefore vitiated as much by too violent direction given by our will as by too great negligence. We do not determine what we will think. We only open our senses, clear away as we can all obstruction from the fact, and suffer the intellect to see. We have little control over our thoughts. We are the prisoners of ideas. They catch us up for moments into the heaven, and so fully engage us that we take no thought for the morrow, gaze like children without any effort to make them our own. By and by, we fall out of that rapture, bethink us where we have been, what we have seen, and repeat as truly as we can what we have beheld. As far as we can recall these ecstasies, we carry away in the ineffaceable memory, result, and all men and all the ages confirm it. It is called truth. But the moment we cease to report an attempt to correct and contrive, it is not truth. If we consider that persons have stimulated and profited us, we shall perceive the superiority of the spontaneous or intuitive principle over the arithmetical or logical. The first contains the second, but virtual and latent. We want, in every man, a long logic. We cannot pardon the absence of it. But it must not be spoken. I'm going to repeat that. We want in every man a long logic. We cannot pardon the absence of it. But it must not be spoken. Logic is the procession of proportionate unfolding of the intuition, but its virtue is a silent method. The moment it would appear as propositions and have a separate value, it is worthless. In every man's mind, some images, words, and facts remain without effort on his part to imprint them, which others forget, and afterwards these illustrate to him important laws. All our progress is an unfolding. Like the vegetable bud, you have first an instinct, then an opinion, then a knowledge. As a plant has root, bud, and fruit, trust the instinct to the end, though you can render no reason. It is vain to hurry, but trusting it to the end, it shall ripen into truth, and you shall know why you believe. Each mind has its own method. A true man never requires after college rules. What you have aggregated in a natural manner surprises and delights when it is produced. We cannot oversee each other's secrets. We cannot oversee each other's secret. And hence the differences between men and natural endowment are insignificant in comparison with the commonwealth. Do you think, I'm going to repeat that, for we cannot oversee each other's secret, and hence the differences between men and natural endowment are insignificant in comparison with their commonwealth. Do you think the porter and the cook have no anecdotes, no experiences, no wonders for you? Everybody knows as much as the savant. The walls of rude minds are scrawled all over with facts, with thoughts. They shall one day bring a lantern and read the inscriptions. Every man, in the degree in which he has wit and culture, finds his curiosity inflamed concerning the modes of living and thinking of other men, and especially of those classes whose minds have not been subdued by the drill of school education. Instinctive action never ceases in a healthy mind, but becomes richer and more frequent in its informations through all states of culture. At last comes the era of reflection, when we not only observe, but take pains to observe. When we, of set purpose, sit down to consider an abstract truth, when we keep the mind's eye open whilst we converse, whilst we read, whilst we act intent to learn the secret law of some class of facts, with the hardest task. What is the hardest task in the world? To think. I would put myself in the attitude to look in the eye of an abstract truth, and I cannot. I blench and withdraw on this side and on that. I seem to know what he meant, who said, "No man can see God face to face and live." For example, a man explores the basis of civil government. Let him intend his mind without respite, without rest in one direction. Then repeat that. For example, a man explores the basis of civil government. Let him intend his mind without respite, without rest in one direction. His best heat long time avails him nothing. Yet thoughts are flitting before it. We all but apprehend, we dimly forebode the truth. We say, "I will walk abroad, and the truth will take from the clearness to me." We go forth but cannot find it. It seems as if we needed only the stillness and composed attitude of the library to seize the thought. But we come in and are as far from it as at first. Then in a moment, and unannounced, the truth appears. A certain wandering light appears. And in distinction, the principle we wanted, but the oracle comes because we had previously laid siege to the shrine. It seems as if the law of the intellect resembled the law of nature, by which we now inspire, now expire the breath, by which the heart now draws in, then hurls out the blood, the law of undulation. So now you must labor with your brains, and now you must forbear your activity, and see what the great soul showeth. The immortality of man is as legitimately preached from the intellections as from the moral volitions. Every intellection is mainly perspective. Its present value is its least. Inspect what delights you in Plutarch, in Shakespeare, in Cervantes. Each truth that a writer acquires is lantern which he turns full on what facts and thoughts lay already in his mind. And behold, all the mats and rubbish which has littered his garret becomes precious. Every trivial fact in his private biography becomes an illustration of this new principle, revisits the day, and delights all men by its piquancy, a new charm. Men say, "Where did he get this?" and think there was something divine in his life. But no, they have myriads of facts, just as good. Would they only get a lamp to ransack their attics withal? We are all wise. The difference between persons is not in wisdom, but in art. I knew an academical club, a person who always deferred to me, who, seeing my whim for writing, fancied that my experiences had somewhat superior, whilst I saw that his experiences were as good as mine. Give them to me, and I would make the same use of them. He held the old, he holds the new. I have a habit of tacking together the old and the new, which he did not use to exercise. This may hold in the great examples. Perhaps if we should meet Shakespeare, we should not be conscious of any steep inferiority. No, but of a great equality, only that he possessed a strange skill of using, of classifying as facts, which we lacked. For notwithstanding our utter incapacity to produce anything like Hamlet and Othello, see the perfect reception this wit and immense knowledge of life and liquid eloquence find in us all. If you gather apples in the sunshine, or make hay or hoe corn, and then retire within doors and shut your eyes and press them with your hand, you shall see apples hanging in the bright light, with boughs and leaves thereto, or the tassel grass, or the cornflakes, and this 4, 5, or 6 hours afterwards. There lie the impressions on the retentive organ, though you knew it not. So lies a whole series of natural images with which your life has made you acquainted in your memory, though you know it not, and a thrill of passion flashes light on their dark chamber, and the active power seizes instantly the fit image, as the word of its momentary thought. It is long ere we discover how rich we are. Our history, we are sure, is quite tame. We have nothing to write, nothing to infer, but our wiser years and still run back to the despised collections of childhood. And always we are fishing up some wonderful article out of that pond, until by and by we begin to suspect that the biography of the one foolish person we know is in reality nothing less than the miniature paraphrase of the 100 volumes of the universal history. And the intellect, constructive, which we popularly designate by the word genius, we observe the same balance of two elements as an intellect receptive. The constructive intellect produces thoughts, sentences, poems, plans, designs, systems. It is the generation of the mind, the marriage of thought with nature. To genius must always go to two gifts, the thought and the publication. The first is revelation, always a miracle, which no frequency of occurrence or incessant study can ever familiarize, but which must always leave the inquirer stupid with wonder. It is the advent of truth into the world, a form of thought now for the first time bursting into the universe, a child of the old eternal soul, a piece of genuine and immeasurable greatness, seems for the first time to inherit all that has yet existed and to dictate to the unborn. It affects every thought of man and goes to fashion every institution. But to make it available, it needs a vehicle, an art, by which it is conveyed. It needs a vehicle. To make it available, it needs a vehicle or art by which it is conveyed to men. To be communicable, it must become picture or sensible object. We must learn the language of facts. Most wonderful inspirations die with their subject, if he has no hand to paint them to the senses. The ray of light passes invisible through space, and only when it falls on an object is it seen. When the spiritual energy is directed on something outward, then it is a thought. The relation between it and you first makes you, the value of you, apparent to me. The rich inventive genius of the painter must be smothered and lost for want of the power of drawing. And in our happy hours we should be inexhaustible poets. If once we could break through the silence into adequate rhyme, as all men have some access to primary truth, so all have some art of power, of communication in their head, but only in the artist does it descend into the hand. There is an inequality whose laws we do not yet know between two men and between two moments of the same man in respect to this faculty. In common hours, we have the same facts as in the uncommon or inspired, but they do not sit I'll repeat that. In common hours, we have the same facts in the uncommon or inspired, but they do not sit for their portrait. They are not detached, but lie in a web. The thought of genius is spontaneous, but the power of picture or expression in the most enriched and flowing nature implies a mixture of will, a certain control over the spontaneous states, without which no production is possible. It is a conversion of all nature into the rhetoric of thought, under the eye of judgment, with a strenuous exercise of choice. And yet, the imaginative vocabulary seems to be spontaneous also. It does not flow from experience only or mainly, but from a richer source, not by any conscious imitation of particular forms of the grand strokes of the painter execute, who by appearing to the fountainhead of all forms in his mind, who was the first drawing master. With that instruction, we know very well the ideal of the human form. A child knows if an arm or a leg be distorted in a picture, if the attitude be natural or grand or mean, though he has never received any instruction in drawing or heard any conversation on the subject, nor can himself draw with a correctness a single feature. A good form strikes all eyes pleasantly, long before they have any science on the subject, and a beautiful face sets 20 hearts in palpitation, prior to all consideration of the mechanical proportions of the features and head. We may owe to dreams some light on the fountain of this skill, for as soon as we let our will go, and let the conscious state ensue, see what cunning draughtsmen we are. We entertain ourselves with wonderful forms of men, of women, of animals, of gardens, of woods, and of monsters, and the mystic pencil wherewith we then draw has no awkwardness or inexperience, no meaningness, no meagerness or poverty. It can design well and group well. Its composition is full of art. Its colors are well laid, and the whole canvas which it paints is lifelike and apt to touch us with terror, with tenderness, with desire, and with grief. Neither are the artist's copies from experience ever mere copies, but always touched and softened by tints from this ideal domain. The conditions essential to a constructive mind do not appear to be often combined, but that a good sentence or verse remains fresh and memorable for a long time. Yet when we write with ease and come out in the free air of thought, we seem to be assured that nothing is easier than to continue this communication at pleasure. Up, down, around, the kingdom of thought has no enclosures, but the muse makes us free of our city. While the world has a million writers, one would think, then that good thought would be as familiar as air and water, and the gifts of each new hour would exclude the last. Yet we can count all our good books. Nay, I remember any beautiful verse for 20 years. It is true that the discerning intellect of the world is always much in advance of the creative, so that there are many competent judges of the best book and few writers of the best books. But some of the conditions of intellectual construction are a rare occurrence. The intellect is a whole and demands integrity in every book. This is resisted equally by a man's devotion to a single thought and by his ambition to combine too many. Truth is our element of life. Yet if a man fastens his attention on a single aspect of truth and apply himself to that alone for a long time, the truth becomes distorted and not itself but falsehood, herein resembling the ear, which is our natural element and the breath of our nostrils. But if a stream of the same be directed on the body for a time, it causes cold, fever, and even death. How wearisome the grammarian, the phrenologist, the political or legit fanatic, or indeed any possessed mortal whose balance is lost by the exaggeration of a single topic. It is incipient insanity. Every thought is a prison also. Let me just go back. How wearisome the grammarian, the phrenologist, the political or religious fanatic, or indeed any possessed mortal whose balance is lost by the exaggeration of a single topic. It is incipient insanity. Every thought is a prison also. I cannot see what you see because I am caught up by a strong wind and blown so far in one direction that I am out of the loop of your horizon. Is it any better as a student to avoid this offense and to liberalize himself aims to make a mechanical whole of story or science or philosophy by a numerical addition of all the facts that fall within his vision? The world refuses to be analyzed by addition and subtraction. When we are young, we spend much time and pains in filling our notebooks with all definitions of religion, love, poetry, politics, art, in the hope that in the course of a few years we shall have condensed into our encyclopedia the net value of all the theories at which the world has yet arrived. But year after year, our tables get no completeness, and at last we discover that our curve is a parabola whose arcs will never meet. That's page 300. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to carry on the next video. Please be so kind as to leave your thoughts, comments, and feedback in the comment section down below. I look forward to hearing from you. What do you think about these amazing messages I'm delivering through this reading? What do you think about my style of reading? What do you think about these spiritual ideas? Do they resonate with you? Have you gained from this amazing wisdom that Waldo Emerson is sharing with us? I hope you have. I want to hear more about it. Please be so kind as to leave it in the comment section down below. Please smash the like button. Dislike it if you don't like this video. Your feedback would be much appreciated. And please subscribe if you haven't already. I look forward to hearing from you. Have a lovely day ahead. We'll be in touch. Thanks.